But we know that's not always the best decision, and I'm concerned that some employers may be trying to cut costs by forcing people to do a rollover. Or in some cases, services providers may be trying to earn a higher fee by encouraging rollovers. We'll now move to panel two. Panel two, we have three witnesses. The first will be Mr. Jack Vander. He is the research director at the Employee Benefit Research Institute. Dr. Vander has more than 100 publications devoted to employee benefits and insurance. His major areas of research focus on the financial aspects of private defined benefit and defined contribution retirement plans. Dr. Vander will give us some statistics regarding participation and savings. And then we have Mr. Ross Eisenbray, Vice President of the Economic Policy Institute. Prior to joining the Economic Policy Institute, Mr. Eisenbray worked as a staff attorney and legislative director in the U.S. House of Representatives, a committee counsel in the U.S. Senate, and as policy director of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Mr. Eisenbray will talk about how the system is failing many workers and the importance, again, of Social Security. And finally, we will hear from Shireen Miller, a home care worker from Falls Church, Virginia, who will give us a firsthand account of the challenges workers face in trying to prepare for retirement. And for all of you, your written statements will be made a part of the record in their entirety. And I'd ask if you could just sum it up. And the clock says 5 minutes, but 5, 6, 7 minutes. I won't get too excited, but once it starts going over 7, I'll start getting a little nervous, okay? But somewhere in that range, if you could sum it up so we could get into a nice exchange here, I'd appreciate it. Mr. Vander, I've read your testimony, extremely interesting and insightful, but please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Harken and Senator Sanders. I am Jack Vander, Research Director of the Employee Benefit Research Institute. EBRI is a nonpartisan institute that has been conducting original research on retirement and health benefits for the past 32 years. EBRI does not take policy positions and does not lobby. Today's testimony will deal with the following 4 topics. First, sponsorship and participation in employment-based retirement plans. Secondly, the national and individual retirement adequacy deficits. Third, the importance of Social Security. And fourth, Americans' retirement confidence. First, a quick look at the numbers will tell you where the nation is today when it comes to Americans' participation in retirement plan. Among all of the 154 million Americans who worked in 2009, almost half, just over 49%, worked for an employer or a union that sponsored a pension or retirement plan, and almost 40% participated in a plan. For full-time, full-year wage and salary workers between 21 and 64, 54% of these workers participated in a retirement plan. Obviously, the likelihood of a worker participating in an employment-based retirement plan goes up sharply with employer size. For workers at employers with fewer than 10 employees, less than 14% participated in a plan, compared with 53% of those working for an employer with 1,000 or more employees. Now, looking at the more than 78 million workers who did not work for an employer sponsoring a plan in 2009, about 12% were self-employed. Of the remaining 69 million workers who were not offered retirement benefits, almost 10% were under the age of 21, and about 5% were age 65 or older. Almost half, 48%, were not full-time, full-year workers. 27% had annual earnings of less than $10,000, and more than half, 57%, worked for employers with less than 100 employees. What these numbers show is the structural reasons why many Americans do not have employment-based retirement benefits. They don't work full-time, they work at small firms, or they are very low income. Measuring retirement income adequacy is an extremely important complex topic, and EBRI started to provide this type of measurement in the late 1990s. When we modeled the baby boomers and Gen Xers in 2010, as you mentioned earlier, between 44 and 47% of the households were projected to be at risk of not having adequate retirement income for basic retirement expenses plus uninsured health care costs. Even though this number is quite large, the good news is that that is 11 to 12 percentage points lower than what we found in 2003. Who's most at risk? Figure 1 in my oral testimony shows, not surprisingly, lower income households are much more likely to be at risk for insufficient retirement income. The 2010 baseline at-risk ratings range from 76% for the lowest income households to only 20% of the highest income households. Figure 2 in my oral testimony shows the average retirement income deficits by age, family status, and gender for baby boomers and Gen Xers. The average individual deficit with current Social Security retirement benefits is estimated to be approximately $48,000 per individual. If you were to eliminate Social Security benefits, that would increase to approximately $89,000. In aggregate terms, that would be an increase from $4.6 to $8.5 trillion. The importance of Social Security retirement benefits for low-income workers is shown in Figure 1 of my testimony. 91% of the lowest income households would be at risk of inadequate retirement income if they had no Social Security retirement benefits, and that's compared to 76% with the current Social Security benefits. Perhaps surprisingly, the other three higher income quartiles also benefit from Social Security to the extent that 24 to 26% of households in those groups are saved from at-risk status because of Social Security retirement benefits. Not surprisingly, these trends have been clearly reflected in our annual retirement confidence survey for the last 20 years. Only 16% of workers in the 2010 RCS say they are very confident they will have enough money to live comfortably through their retirement years. Moreover, those who say they are saving has not grown. The percentage of workers who reported they and/or their spouse had saved for retirement now stands at 69%. In addition to the lack of improvement in percentage savings, the percentage of workers who have virtually no money in savings and investments has increased over the past year. As you've already mentioned, among RCS workers providing this type of information, 54% report that the total value of their household savings and investments, excluding the value of the primary home and any defined benefit plans, is less than $25,000. The propensity to guess or to do their own calculation may help to explain why the amounts that workers say they need to accumulate for a comfortable retirement appears to be rather low. 29% of workers say they need to save less than $250,000 for a comfortable retirement. Another 17 mention a goal of between $250,000 and $500,000. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I welcome the opportunity to work with the committee in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanderhei. And now we turn to Ross Eisenbray. Ross, again, your statement will be made part of the record. Please proceed.
Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Chairman. Senator Sanders, Eisenbray, Vice President of the Economic Policy Institute. We're a founding member of two groups, Strengthen Social Security and Retirement USA, that together represent over 50 million people who share a common view that strengthening retirement security requires strengthening Social Security, a goal that a higher retirement age would undermine. And Retirement USA just this month happens to be in the middle of Wake Up Washington month to do exactly what you're doing and try to let policymakers and the American public realize better what a crisis we're actually in retirement savings. The three-legged stool supporting retirement income has actually always been wobbly for most Americans. It's had one long, sturdy leg, which is Social Security, and two shorter, less reliable legs, employer-provided plans and personal savings. Social Security covers 97% of employees and provides more than half of retirement income for 55% of seniors, and a quarter of seniors get more than 90% of their income from Social Security. The second leg, personal savings, as you've just heard, is not very substantial. It's been shrinking as middle-class incomes have been squeezed. The housing market's collapse has only added to those woes. And the third leg, employer-provided pensions, have never covered much more than half of employees. Never. But the quality of coverage has declined steadily over the last 30 years, with traditional defined benefit pension plans disappearing and 401k plans replacing them. Now, 401ks have not proved to be an adequate substitute for the traditional pension plan or even for hybrid cash balance plans. The reasons are well known, and Phyllis Borsey and you both have mentioned some of them. They don't provide lifetime benefits, and retirees can outlive their assets. Employees, rather than professionals, manage their own assets, and they tend to do pretty badly. They take too much risk or too little risk. They fail to diversify. They put their investments in their employer stock. Even after Enron, we see this. And as you say, fees can decimate investment returns. Loans and hardship withdrawals that you've mentioned leak away assets. And then, you know, the fundamental issue is that employers generally contribute only through a match for employees' contributions, and lower income employees, as you've heard, tend not to participate, so they don't get anything from their employer as a result. The tax incentives are completely upside down for this program. They're skewed to higher income, higher tax bracket employees who need savings help the least, and as a result, 80% of the tax benefits, the incentives for participating in 401k plans, go to the top 20% of earners, just increasing the kind of income inequality that you and Senator Sanders have been talking about. The result is a nation woefully unprepared for retirement, and I have slightly different figures, but they're of the, about the same magnitude as you've just heard from Mr. Vanderhei. The Center for Retirement Research calculates that the retirement income deficit for households 32 to 64 is $6.6 trillion, and the federal budget deficit, of course, is about $1.2 trillion, to give you a reminder about the magnitude of this. So the 401k, I think, is at the heart of this problem. It's had serious negative consequences. It's increased inequality and allowed upper-income families to shelter more and more of their income from taxation without increasing overall retirement savings at a cost which you ought to try to calculate, which is somewhere, I think, between $1 and $2 trillion over the last 30 years. What have we bought for that? Its creation precipitated the loss of the traditional pension by providing employers a way to shift investment risk to employees as well as part of the cost of contributions. But other congressional actions have also harmed the defined benefit pension plan. Before 1986, some of these were well-intentioned and some of them were actually, I think, wise changes, but they still led to a decline in pension plans. Pension plans were a handy tax shelter for employers because earnings contributed to a plan aren't taxed, and employers routinely overfunded plans. But in 1986, Congress put limits on overfunding. Congress put limits on overfunding as a way to cut the federal budget deficit, and then made it harder for employers to recapture excess assets, which they were doing by putting on large excise taxes. Congress tightened funding rules to make them pinch hardest, and you did this again just a few years ago, to pinch hardest at the very times employers can least afford to increase their contributions during recessions and business downturns, whereas 401k plans are always funded, at 100% by the contributions that the employer makes, and employers can actually cut back and suspend their contributions unless they have a collective bargaining agreement. And then faster vesting rules, which were an important thing to make sure that employees got a pension, made pensions more expensive. All of these things and others, which I can talk about, contributed to the decline. But the result, of course, is this huge shift where 40% used to have a defined benefit plan and now less than 20%. So as on page 4 of my testimony, you'll see what the Center for Retirement Research predicts. The share of Americans at risk of being unable to maintain their living standards in retirement increases over time. Each succeeding generation will have less security going forward. Gen Xers, God save them, 71% will be at risk of not having an adequate retirement income. So my message is the one that you have already announced yourself. The most important thing I can say is that cutting Social Security benefits in this context would be disastrous. It would be pulling